Hey everyone, I'm Tara of Geek Saga Entertainment, and welcome to the Geek Saga Show's new solo podcast series, Impulsive Hyperfocus. First things first, follow me at A Geek Saga on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, or Twitter for insight into my life and, of course, updates about this and other Geek Saga Entertainment endeavors. And if you want early access to these and other podcast-only recordings, links to personal Spotify playlists, show notes, writing samples, and more, check out the Geek Saga Entertainment Patreon at patreon.com/geeksaga_entertainment. I kicked off the first episode of this series by explaining why I'm calling it that. So if you missed Geek Saga Podcast episode 95, check it out for that explanation. And for this and future Impulsive Hyperfocus episodes, I'm going to simply highlight one thing about me before diving into the episode's subject. And for this one, I want to mention that, hey, I also write stuff. While I haven't published a novel since 2017, I have a couple things in the works, but for now, if you're interested in checking out my books, the author name I use is T.L. Walker, and I have an alternate history Western titled The Way of Reckoning and a zombie apocalypse novel called How to Start Living in the Zombie Apocalypse that can both be found on Amazon as ebooks and paperbacks and also on the Barnes & Noble website as paperbacks. Now it's time to dig into the actual subject of this episode, which I made a post on Facebook for my friends asking, hey, I have a whole ton of subjects I want to talk about, and here are the three that I'm most interested in talking about sooner rather than later. They were Serial, really crazy / weird travel agency stories from back in the day when I actually worked at a travel agency, or some stories from when I was a seasonal Disney employee. The vast majority of my friends told me they wanted to hear me talk about Serial, which kind of surprised me because this is a very weirdly specific subject, but also I feel like it's probably the most perfect second thing to talk about for these Impulsive Hyperfocus episodes. So I'm talking about Serial in this episode. And I'm going to start by saying that despite the fact that new studies have been published claiming that maybe breakfast isn't as important as has been insisted, my entire life, and surely before that as well. Generally, most doctors and scientists still say it makes for healthier eating habits and all sorts of other positive things. But I also know that I've totally eaten breakfast on mornings when I woke up not hungry at all, more times than I can count, simply because it was so drilled into us that it was almost like, if you don't eat breakfast, you'll get sick and die. Christ, honestly. I don't know. 80s and 90s commercial messaging. Lol. But that said, I am absolutely hungry for breakfast at least 85% of the time, probably even more like 90%. And also, I just love me some breakfast food. Sometimes I might enjoy a Pop-Tart, although I'm very particular about Pop-Tarts, and I'm still sad that the pretzel Pop-Tarts with chocolate filling are a thing that kind of went away after a while, because those were my favorites and they were very recent in terms of additions to the Pop-Tart flavors. Anyway, whatever. Sometimes I might enjoy a Pop-Tart or a bagel with cream cheese, sometimes even butter actually, or yogurt plain by itself, but more often I will add some granola to it, living real large here. And once in a great while, I'll make pancakes or Pillsbury cinnamon rolls at home. I will say this though, I have a weird relationship with eggs and bacon. Sometimes I'm not even sure I like eggs. I'll eat them, but I don't know that I actually like them. And omelets make like the idea of omelets literally like makes me kind of I can also take or leave bacon. And actually, I prefer turkey bacon over real bacon, and have also never really understood how or why people act like bacon is the best thing on earth. So there's that. Absolutely take me out to brunch for some probably overpriced avocado toast with interesting topping choices, some quality eggs Benedict, or above all, some fancy pancakes. I live for the tiramisu pancakes at a place called Cafe 21 in San Diego, or Hash House A Go-Go's gigantic Snickers pancake. But I digress, because this episode isn't supposed to be about Pop-Tarts or bagels or my bacon opinions or my favorite vacation breakfasts. It is, in fact, supposed to be about my lifelong love of cereal. For real, though, I've actually had people tell me that my love for cereal is weird. Thankfully, those people are no longer part of my life, because who needs that kind of negativity? Also, the internet long ago proved that my love for cereal is greater than that of most people, but that there are absolutely plenty of people out there who have far more feelings about it than I do. But here's the real question. Can I actually talk about cereal for at least 20 minutes for this podcast? Let's see. So, because I'm me, here's a bit of a history lesson to start. There actually seems to be a slight disconnect as to who actually created the first ever breakfast cereal, because a German immigrant named Ferdinand Schumacher, founder of what would become the Quaker Oats Company, apparently used a hand oats grinder to make cereal, quote unquote cereal, as early as 1854. But the first cold breakfast cereal was apparently called granula. Yes, granula, not granola, and was created by religiously conservative vegetarian James Caleb Jackson in 1863. Fast forward a little bit. In researching stuff for this podcast, I really wanted to talk about the whole part of this complete breakfast thing, because I honestly assumed that this was something that only came about in, I guess I assumed it was the 80s because that's when I grew up, but holy crap, no, that's not the way it happened. The phrase part of this complete breakfast was originally invented by Kellogg's something like a century ago. And of course, it was to convince people that they should add cereal to their breakfast bread. But it's actually fucking meaningless, because it basically means that for most of your nutritional needs, you need to eat other things with breakfast. So okay. Then the commercials I searched out to remind myself what else was part of those complete breakfasts seemed to only show toast, orange juice, and I guess drinking milk in addition to your cereal milk. And sure, the OJ takes care of some fruit needs, but why toast? You're already getting those cereal carbs, but hey, let's add more carbs to those carbs? I don't, why? What? And even if we pretend that breakfast was a truly complete one, even as an adult, a bowl of cereal is quite enough for me, thanks. There's no way I could eat that plus toast and also down an entire glass of OJ plus an entire glass of milk. Also, I don't love orange juice, have never had the desire to drink straight milk. Toast is something I pretty much only eat when I'm sick, and this episode is supposed to be about cereal, so I'm gonna go ahead and get back to that. I feel like I have to preface this next part by saying that while my cereal choices have been and still kind of are all over the place, there's one rule I have about cereal. Growing up, despite my parents being barely above the poverty level until I was maybe 11 or 12 years old, my mom, for some reason, never bought off-brand or store-brand cereal or cereal in a bag. And since being on my own, despite being basically flat-ass broke more than a few times, I never have either. I completely recognize that this is a privileged choice. And yes, more than a few people have told me that you really can't taste the difference. In fact, as I'm hearing these words come out of my mouth, I'm legit thinking, why am I like this? I'm sure they taste the same. But yeah, if you were hoping to hear anything about comparing name brand versus off or store brand cereals, or hoping that I would talk about the latter at all, it's not going to happen. To begin with, I want to talk about going through cereal phases. And by this, I mean, I would literally eat the same cereal, or maybe like have two cereals that I would choose between for months, if not years at a time. And I'm going to start this with unhealthy cereals because I just absolutely have to kick this conversation off by talking about my absolute obsession with Count Chocula as a kid. And like, I wish I could say that I completely grew out of it as I got older, but I definitely remember housing some Count Chocula even into my 20s. To be honest, I don't even know if I stopped buying it regularly because I just wasn't feeling it as much anymore, or because they stopped producing it year round. I do know that whenever they started bringing it back seasonally, one of my family members bought me a box because they remembered my being obsessed with it. But when I tried to eat some of it, it was like, holy crap, why did I ever love this? It is too much. Christ. Oh, Count Chocula. I was going to say I both do not and do miss you, but no, I don't miss it at all. Anyway, while Count Chocula was probably my longest running unhealthy cereal obsession, I also went through phases with quite a few other unhealthy cereals, including Cookie Crisp. I'm sorry, I had to do that. Which I also have not had in, I don't know, a decade, 15 years, maybe 20. I honestly can't remember. And speaking of crisps, Waffle Crisp, which I honestly thought was discontinued, but apparently they brought it back. Not that I have literally any desire to eat it again. And then there was a honeycomb cereal, which I'll still buy every once in a great while, and then wonder why I bought such a giant box of a cereal that I get tired of super fast. Oh, and Apple Jacks is another one that is in the same category as honeycomb on all fronts. Not quite in the same vein, but I've had Cocoa Pebbles phases and basically only don't buy them anymore because I can't really stomach how they turn the milk to chocolate milk. Then there's Corn Pops, which, yes, belong in the unhealthy cereals list because they are way higher in sugar than you'd assume. But above all, I have to mention Reese's Puffs. And honestly, just thinking about this cereal makes me cringe. I feel like I can remember the way they taste, and I don't know if there's a bad memory attached to them that I've blocked out or what, because I can barely stomach even thinking about them. Like that peanut butter, oh God, like I don't know. And I will never eat these again, but I ate the fuck ton out of some Reese's Puffs for a long time. However, Oreo O's. Oreo O's are a thing. I haven't had them in a long time because I preferred them with marshmallows. And both the original Oreo O's and the marshmallow version were discontinued for a while, but they did bring back the regular kind, I think in like 2017 or something. And while I was looking up cereals that I remembered loving for this podcast, I saw that they recently released a Mega Stuff version of the cereal that once again has marshmallows. And yes, I will probably be looking for this on my next grocery trip because I need to try them, because I really thought that maybe I was like misremembering the fact that there were Oreo O's with marshmallows, but there were. And when they like undiscontinued them, they didn't have marshmallows. And it was like kind of, we don't talk about Oreo O's with marshmallows. We don't talk about them. No, no, no. Okay, that was terrible, but I'm probably going to leave it in because it's also kind of funny. I was kind of worried that I was like misremembering something, but no, they did originally have Oreo O's with marshmallows. It was for a very short time. And then the whole Oreo O's thing was discontinued. In looking up all these cereals, I remembered that came and went and came again. Haha, dirty. Oreo O's was one that I actually found, weirdly enough, like a LinkedIn article about it where they were talking about the roller coaster journey of this cereal. And apparently, originally, this cereal was created because Kraft, the company that owned Oreo, also owned Post, which obviously is like a cereal brand. So they made Oreo O's and they lasted for like 10 years or so. And they discontinued them because Kraft and Post parted ways, and Kraft retained the rights to the Oreo name, but Post had the cereal recipe. And I'll be honest, like this whole thing just like blows my fucking mind because I always assumed that cereals were discontinued because they just weren't selling well or whatever. But this is just American bullshit. Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't even know what you'd call this. Like, why was this a thing that even happened? And also, Oreo O's did continue to be available exclusively in South Korea because there were some like licensing agreements. So there was for a while a niche market of people importing Oreo O's at like premium prices, which just kills me. So Oreo O's in 2017, they came back. Why did they come back? Well, me over here with my anti like off-brand store brand bag cereal lifestyle didn't know that there was a malto meal cookies and cream cereal, which was basically the same exact thing, that performed super well. And that success led to Kraft licensing the Oreo name to Post again, bringing back this cereal. Now that I have waxed on so much about Oreo O's, I also want to mention that s'mores, I think it's like Honey Maid S'mores, it's a Post cereal, is the current unhealthy cereal that I most consistently have a box of and have for quite a while now, like years and years. Though I do have to admit that even though I never really liked Lucky Charms, even as a kid, for some reason I did go through a Lucky Charms phase last year. And since I'm talking about cereals with marshmallows, I want to be very clear that when I'm eating a cereal that has marshmallows, all of the dry bits, let's call them dry bits, all of the dry bits go first, right? You eat all of the dry bits first and you save all of the marshmallows for last. Obviously, you might from time to time have to have a marshmallow in your spoonful of dry bits, but the dry bits get eaten first and the marshmallows are saved for last, right? I'm not even asking anybody if that's a thing they do, because I feel like if that's not a thing you do, I'm not even sure that we can be friends. Like if you're just eating spoonfuls of the cereal just willy-nilly, you're eating a spoonful of Lucky Charms and not caring how many marshmallows are in it. You're eating a spoonful of Oreo O's that somehow have marshmallows in them again and not caring how many marshmallows are in that spoonful. And same goes with and also the Honey Maid S'mores cereal. It's like, I'll be honest, the graham bits are better dry. And the Cocoa Puff part, because that's basically what they are, they're Cocoa Puffs, they're kind of like a side note. And the marshmallows need to be saved for last. And I don't know. I'm very particular about this. And if you are a person who actually just takes spoonfuls of cereal, regardless of how many marshmallows there are, into your mouth, then maybe I applaud you and maybe I don't like you. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm going to move on to my healthy, quote unquote, cereal phases. And I'm putting this in quotes because I'm not entirely certain that all of these are truly healthy cereals. And they're even less healthy when you add a bunch of sugar, which I did with a lot of them. So I'm just going to kick this off with Cheerios and multigrain Cheerios. But again, I kind of made at least the plain Cheerios unhealthy by dumping sugar on them. Yes, even as an adult. And no, by the way, I've never liked Honey Nut Cheerios and will only eat them if absolutely necessary. So don't come at me with that. Also, Life cereal. But I really only truly love plain Life cereal. I will eat Cinnamon Life, but plain Life is far superior. Don't at me. Another one that I've had, I think, mostly a love relationship with, and I'm not really sure if this entirely belongs in healthy cereals because of the things I like about it / do to it, but Special K strawberries or Special K, I think it's called like chocolatey something, but I'm just going to call it Special K chocolate or Special K strawberries and chocolate. The other option is just get Special K strawberries and add mini chocolate chips to it, since they don't make the mix of Special K strawberries and chocolate anymore. Unless they never made that mix and I'm having a Mandela effect moment, I don't know. I also ate Honey Bunches of Oats for a long time without ever adding in another cereal for a change of pace. So it became one of those situations where I kind of overdid it and now would only eat Honey Bunches of Oats if I had absolutely no other choices. Oh, and Frosted Mini Wheats are another one I bring back from time to time. But like Cheerios, I dump sugar on them. Yes, despite the fact that they're already frosted. So they only belong in this healthy cereal category of their own accord, not at all in the way I eat them. And the same goes for regular old Rice Krispies, by the way. And yes, y'all, I can't believe I'm admitting this, but I even went through a grape nuts phase. Granted, I could only eat them after they were soaked in milk for several minutes before eating them, and also with like actual literal piles of sugar. If I were to count the tablespoons of sugar I put in a bowl of grape nuts, it's just obnoxious. Like, of course, this made them even less healthy than they already are, because how good for you can they really be? Like, sure, they're high in fiber, but they're literally just dried up bread bits. So they're supposedly one of the more healthy cereals, but they're just dried up bread bits. Nope. Don't ever want to eat grape nuts again. I would if I was forced to, but don't want to. Now that I've gone through that entire list, last but certainly not least, a big shout out to my longest running fave healthy cereal, Basic 4. No need to add sugar, though, man, I do think they're stingy as fuck with what they call, quote, coated vanilla clusters. In fact, when I find a particularly generous coated vanilla cluster, I still to this day take a picture of it and text it to my friend Jenna from Connecticut, because in the early years of our friendship, we very regularly got high and assuaged our munchies with giant bowls of Basic 4. And the highlight of these Basic 4 snack attacks was when we would get a particularly awesome, quote, coated vanilla cluster. Also, yes, I felt the need to insert the term coated vanilla cluster as many times as possible here, because what the fuck is the cluster? Why is it called that? Is it because the cluster's coating is vanilla? Or because whatever the cluster is vanilla and also coated in vanilla? I'm sure I could do a pseudo deep dive Google on this and find out, but let's be real, it's funnier to just leave these questions as is. Anyway, you probably noticed a pattern with the cereals I remember obsessing over, or maybe the lack of a pattern. Either way, I have never been big on fruity cereals. Will I eat them? Have I eaten them? Sure, but they're literally never my first choice. So now I'm going to sort of move on from my cereal phases to talk about discontinued cereals I remember eating, but also kind of not really, because some of these were definitely cereals I ate on the regular for as long as I could. So they were cereal phases, but in my opinion, it made more sense to lump all of the discontinued ones together. So without further ado, who else remembers Dino Pebbles? I think this is the fruity dino shaped cereal bits I recall, but if there was another one like that has been discontinued, please let me know, because I definitely remember maybe not necessarily loving, but eating a cereal that had dinosaur shaped bits. And when I Googled it, apparently there's like a Trix one that has dino bits, but I think that's like a Jurassic World thing that's come out more recently. So I'm guessing it's like Dino Pebbles, which was a, Fruity Pebbles, Cocoa Pebbles version that had dinosaur bits, whatever. Then there were Marshmallow Rice Krispies. Not to be confused with the Rice Krispies Treats cereal, because this one actually had marshmallows in it, and I totally remember eating that. But also, speaking of the Rice Krispie Treat cereal, I almost mentioned this one in my unhealthy cereal phases list, but had to move it to this list because it's apparently been discontinued, and I honestly didn't even remember that it had been. And I'm kind of sad about it a little bit. Anyway, French Toast Crunch, which if it was brought back, I would probably try it again, but I have a feeling I wouldn't actually want more than like that first box. Like I would want to try it again, and I feel like I wouldn't hate it because I definitely loved it when I was younger, but I also don't think I could really stomach eating it on a regular basis. Also, I feel like I remember eating the Pop-Tart cereal, which absolutely did exist, but only for a very short time. And I know there was like a strawberry Pop-Tarts one, and I think there was like a cookies and cream one. And I just, like, I have this like sort of weirdly visceral memory of a cereal shaped like slightly bigger Captain Crunch bits and also less sharp, so they weren't like, cutting the top of your mouth all the time. And they had like a softer filling. And when I looked it up, I was like, okay, yes, it has to be this Pop-Tart cereal. Like that has to be what I'm thinking about. But they were only available for a short time, so I suppose I could be like misconstruing this with something else. However, then there were cinnamon mini buns, which apparently became Mini Swirls cinnamon bun cereal. And I don't remember the rebranding or whatever, but apparently this cereal has been gone since 2009, and I didn't even know they got rid of it. And I think like looking it up and seeing it, I'm like, I don't even really love cinnamon cereal. Hence my earlier comment about cinnamon life being meh and preferring regular life. But And also, I've never mentioned Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I'm sure you would notice once in here because, But for whatever reason, I do remember really loving this like cinnamon bun cereal. And now they've been gone since 2009. And I honestly don't remember them being gone. And now that I know they're gone, I fucking want some. Another cereal that kept coming up in my searches for like discontinued cereals, because I'm old and I have to like remind myself of things, was an ice cream cone cereal. And like, I want to say I remember eating this, but then part of me is like, how the fuck possibly could I? Because it apparently only existed in 1986, meaning I would have been like 3 to 4 years old. So I feel like I remember this ice cream shaped cereal, but I think that's just maybe my brain wanting to remember eating this ice cream cone shaped cereal because that sounds amazing. Anyway, speaking of discontinued cereals, every time I see a new ridiculous sounding or looking cereal on the shelves, I wonder how long it's going to last, especially lately when I swear the new thing is like extreme cereals. Recently, I noted that they're producing quote unquote loaded versions of cereals like Trix and Cinnamon Toast Crunch and Cocoa Puffs. And the Cocoa Puffs are the ones that caught my eye first because the front of the box just said "Livin' Cereal Rich," and the cereal was being served in a crown-shaped bowl. Like, what the fuck? I was looking at this thinking like, what is this weird, crazy new cereal? And then I realized that the top of the box said Cocoa Puffs loaded. And also realized that the two cereals next to it, whose names were like right on the front of the boxes, by the way, were the aforementioned Cinnamon Toast Crunch loaded and Trix loaded. And I'm saying it that way because like the cereal name was like normal, but the loaded was just like obnoxious. And I feel like if I say it any louder, it's gonna fuck up my sound. And I'm gonna have to mess with the sound for this podcast too much. But for real, like the Cinnamon Toast Crunch and Trix loaded boxes, they just said that shit right on the front. But for whatever reason, the one that caught my eye again was Cocoa Puffs because it did not actually say Cocoa Puffs anywhere on the front of the box. It just said "Livin' Cereal Rich." And the cereal was being served in a crown-shaped bowl. What is happening? Why do we have to be so extreme all the time these days? I don't know. To be fair, there is this small, curious part of me that wants to at least try the Cocoa Puffs one, but I'm honestly afraid I'll like it and then it will disappear sooner rather than later because I still do have like a sweet tooth, as is obvious by the fact that I keep a box of post honey graham s'mores or whatever they're called in my pantry. So anyway, I think I would be remiss if I didn't at least touch on a few more things, namely, first, actual milk versus the things they call milk, but let's be real, aren't, because they do not come from an animal. I have actually used vanilla soy milk at first by necessity and then from time to time by choice, and it's okay with certain types of cereals, but I still feel bad for anyone who is lactose intolerant because nothing really compares to a bowl of cereal with, actual milk. And while skim milk technically fits into that category, ew, no thank you. Like, I honestly think I'd rather have vanilla soy milk than skim milk. Skim milk is so watery and weird and kind of gross. I was raised on whole milk, but 2% was a household staple for me for the longest time once I ended up in relationships with people who insisted upon it, and that works too. I'm not sure I've ever had 1% milk. And when I moved in with Dean, I found out they're a whole milk family. And now I'm totally hooked on whole milk again, as in I can deal with 2%. But yeah, whole milk is so much richer and better all around, in my opinion. Next up, cereal on things, especially donuts. And like, I'm bringing this up because weirdly enough, despite the fact that I do not really like fruity cereals, and this very much includes Fruity Pebbles, which make the milk as fruity as Cocoa Pebbles make it chocolatey, I freaking love me some Fruity Pebbles on a donut, specifically a plain donut with vanilla frosting that is coated in Fruity Pebbles. And also, when I posted about possibly doing a podcast focusing on my love for cereal, a friend mentioned having Honey Nut Cheerios on her ice cream recently. And while I'm not big on Honey Nut Cheerios, I feel like I've been missing out because I've actually never topped ice cream with any sort of cereal as far as I can remember. So obviously this is now on my must try soon list. Are cereal bars still a thing? And by cereal bars, I mean like a place that you go in a city where they just have like cereal and you can like pick and choose cereals and like mix them like Rory and Paris did at Yale when they went to the dining hall in Gilmore Girls. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're missing out. Gilmore Girls hasn't aged the best, but is also still a pretty great show. And I did not ever think about mixing cereals until I watched the scene where Rory and Paris talk about it in Gilmore Girls. So mixing cereal is the thing. Anyway, are cereal bars still a thing? I know they were big for a hot minute. And when I say a hot minute, I mean like I definitely remember this being like the late 20-aughts and maybe the early 20-teens. But I feel like it was a fad. And either way, I've never been to one. And if I can find one on my future travels, I will absolutely be doing the thing. And then pretty recently, definitely within the past like 6 months, one of my coworkers told me about this bakery in New York City that sells mini croissant cereal. As in, they bake it themselves and stuff. And as someone who loves a fucking croissant, I have a big dang need to try this. But apparently it costs like $50 a box. And I just don't know that I could ever justify that. However, if anybody ever wants to spoil me by sending me a box of L'Appartement 4F croissant cereal from NYC, I'm here for that. Shoot me a message and I will send you my address. I'm joking. I don't expect anybody to ever do this, but also, my God, I want this so bad, but I also cannot ever, no matter how much extra money I ever had in my life, $50 for a box of cereal just seems absolutely insane. But I also want it so bad. There's that thing in your life where you're like, I don't need this. Nobody actually needs this. How does this even exist? It is so expensive. And I'm not saying it's overpriced for what it is because I know how they make it and I'm not going to get into that. But also it's like, I want it so bad and I can't ever justify the money. And I'm going off on a tangent because I want it so bad. And I just need to shut up because I want it so bad. And I know I will never actually buy it for myself because it's a lot. And yeah, that's all I can really think of to say about cereal. And considering I thought about and researched and took notes and dredged up memories for this episode for several days between deciding to record it and actually doing the thing, I'm hoping I'm not forgetting or missing anything. In closing, I do have a couple questions for my listeners. Does anyone like or has anyone ever actually liked Honey Smacks and or Golden Crisp? And also, what discontinued breakfast cereal do you miss the most? And on that note, welcome to the end of my second solo rant podcast. Before I close out, I just want to give a shout out to our Heroes Tier patron, Tommy of the TKOK Podcast Network. Thank you to Tommy for his longtime support of Geek Saga Entertainment. To my other listeners, thank you for sticking this out to the end, and I hope you'll tune in for future Impulsive Hyperfocus episodes. I already have quite a few subjects that I want to touch on, and the personal stories to go with them, of course. That said, if you have any thoughts or personal stories of mine you're interested in hearing, or any particular rants or rambles you'd like me to go on, send me a DM at a Geek Saga on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, or Twitter, or email me at ageeksaga@gmail.com, and definitely follow me on social media for the most current news and updates about this series. And please consider backing our Patreon at patreon.com/geeksaga_entertainment for early access to these episodes and other perks.